We're going to continue with our study of Parshat Sefer Mareh Yaakov, and we had started last Shiur to try to introduce some of the other concepts related to the notes. And before we continue with the names of the notes, maybe we'll defer that until next week, because I actually have another concept that I wanted to introduce, which is the level of pause that each of the malachim, each of the notes that has a pause after it, denotes that it tells us that there is, we introduced some concepts from somebody who had taken all of the svarim that talk about the notes, and he had composed it in a sefer called Mehem Mikra, the notes of reading, and he had sort of summarized from a variety of sources concepts and ideas about the notes, and we were going over some of the names last week. But before we continue with that, I wanted to introduce the idea that the notes that have a stop after them are actually ranked into ones that have a very large stop, a medium-sized stop, a lesser stop, and a minimal stop. And we have given out two handouts. The first one, and I guess we'll scan this for anybody who's getting this on tape. The first level, the most major stop, is at Nachtan Sof Pasuk, which we intuitively sort of know. The second level is Segol, Zakef Katan, Zakef Gadol, and Tipcha, and Shoshelet. Those have a fairly large pause after them. So Tipcha especially is something that might be surprising to some people, because usually you find it in the middle of a sentence, but it does have a pause after it, and that affects the grammar and the vowel that comes to the word after it. So it's very important to recognize, and in fact we're going to point that out in the parsha that we just read this week in Chukat. The third level is Revi'i, Zarka, Pashta, Yativ, and Tavir. That has an even lesser pause. And the last one with still a pause after them, but perhaps the most minor, is Pazer, Karnei Parat, Klisha Gdola, Kadma V'Azla, the Azla part, Gershayim, and a munach that sits by itself in front of a sentence. So sometimes you'll have a munach and then a phrase after it. That munach also has that small pause after it. So we're going to go to the second handout that I gave you, and we'll notice that what they've done is they've given various levels of shading after each word to tell you how big or how small a pause is. So Meshukadim with a Gershayim has that smallest pause after it. The Zarka on Echad has that medium-sized pause after it. The Sheshet Hakanim on the third line has that next level of pause after it, and Givi'im with the Etnachta has that large pause after it. And Ufracheha again has Sof Pasuk has that larger pause after it. So you sort of get the idea that each one of these is a stop, but there are different levels and different amounts of time that you're stopping. Every time
car in the world that actually goes like
every time you stop, the word after it is not connected to when you have a stop. So we have rules for which letters in Hebrew get dots. Beged Kefet, Beit, Gimel Daled, Kaf, Pei, and Tav will all potentially have a dot in the letter if they're at the beginning of a word. If the word before it, the word preceding it, ends with Aleph, Hey, Vav, or Yud, then those letters will lose their dot as long as there is not a stop or a pause in between. We got that? So if there's a stop, if we have a Tipcha or a Sof Pasuk or an Etnachta, any of there's not. Mercha leads into a Tipcha. So these are all the notes that are Melachim. These are all the notes that we've categorized as ones that have something of a stop after them. And there's a second set of notes, and bring out the big table here. So the big table here shows on the top all of the ones that have a stop after them, and on the bottom all of the ones that don't have a stop after them. We will eventually go through all of this bit by bit so that we can inculcate all of this information, but we're not going to give it to you all at once, because it's too big and too scary. However, there are two basic categories of notes. Milachim, ones that are like the king and you pause when the king is there, and mishartim, servants who lead you up to the king. The munach that comes before something, the mercha that comes before the tipcha, the kadma that comes before the azla. So all of these things lead into the next one, don't have a pause after them, and therefore the rules of the dots in the beged kefet disappearing after aleph, hey, vav, and yud apply. And the ones that are melachim, if you have another word after it, it doesn't apply because you've actually paused or stopped there. So we're going to come to Parshat
Seems to be an
Chukat.
awful lot that do cause a stop.
Yes.
Yet I don't.
More than half of the notes cause a stop.
Yeah. So when you are reading
That's
Torah,
why there are much lesser degrees of stop.
just doesn't seem. Still seems to all flow. I don't really ever notice.
So let me emphasize. Vayidaber ad Hashem, Moshe v'el Aaron, more. So that's perhaps a little more emphasized than you would hear it read, but those are the pauses that are there.
All right. It's like
So-
a rolling stop to a stop sign. It's sometimes not as noticeable.
So Beged Kefet B'Rosh Milah B'Rosh Havara gets a dot.
Gets a dot,
But the
except
Aleph, Hey,
if the
Vav, Yud.
word before it ends in Aleph, Hey, Vav, or Yud,
Then what happens?
then it does the rule. Then if they end in that, then the Beged Kefet will lose their dot. So Beit will turn into Beit, Gimel will not have a dot, Daled will not have a dot, Kaf will turn into Chaf, Pei will turn into Fei. So you'll hear a difference in pronunciation for some of them, and some of them the dot just disappears.
But it doesn't change the meaning. It's just the
It doesn't.
pronunciation.
It just changes the pronunciation, not the meaning.
Why?
Unless
Why
there's a
would-
stop.
It's like saying sort of
Unless
like
there's a stop. So
Oh.
we're gonna actually go into that. Without the dot is perhaps a weaker presentation of the same word.
Mhm.
The word actually weakens itself or makes itself a little more imperfect because it doesn't have the dot.
Mhm.
So
Isn't it sort
But
of like
there's a
in
reason for
English
that.
when you if it's a word of an A, like the indefinite article before if it's before a word that starts with a vowel, then it's
and it turns into an, yes.
So is that it's basically that's the idea. Like,
It's a
So
grammatical
it's a
the idea,
pronunciation
yes,
thing.
it's a pronunciation thing, but Hebrew
It's not
has
a pronunciation, because in English
Hebrew has something special about it. When it loses the dot, it weakens the word. So we're gonna come to that in a second,
Okay.
because I want to go through some of the pauses from this week's Parshat, Parsha.
Sorry, just to complete
Mhm.
that thought. When it weakens the word, does that mean it links the concept better? That is, it links the previous word
So,
with the new word? But
Correct.
conceptually?
The two words are conceptually linked because it has to be a masharet, because otherwise it's not gonna lose its dot.
And then when it has a stop indicator, then it regains its power of
Mhm.
being its own concept and having that mapik.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
So we were talking. This week's parsha introduces the concept of para aduma, of the red heifer, and how it's used to make something that's tamei into something that's tahor, and it specifically tells us that the person who has come across a dead body, hu yitchatavo, he will take the ashes from the para aduma, and he will gain forgiveness. Bayom hashlishi, on the third day, and then again uvayom hashvi'i, and then again on the seventh day yitar. So if we're not careful, we can say yom hashvi'i yitar. The seventh day will become tahor. It's if we're not careful and read it together, and we're saying that what's becoming holy, the seventh day. It's not the seventh day that's becoming holy. It's the person who's becoming holy. So we need to make sure that there's a note there that has a pause. Hu yitchatavo bayom hashlishi ubayom hashvi'i tipcha, with a pause, yitar. So it's not the seventh day that's becoming holy, it's the person who's becoming holy. How do we know that? Because the tipcha tells us that there's a pause there. So that's example of when you've got a melech with a stop.
Can I
Now
see it? Because I have to visually, sorry.
that's okay. Vayom hashvi'i with a tipcha. The tipcha is one of these notes that we've said has a pause after it. So yitar is separated out from that. So it's the person who's going to become pure on the seventh day, not the seventh day that's going to become
Right,
pure.
okay.
And again, at the end of the sentence, so vayom hashvi'i, the seventh day, with a pause, lo yitar. If he doesn't do it on those days, then he doesn't become pure. It's him not becoming pure, not the seventh day not becoming pure.
And the
So I
tipcha
see.
works backwards, right?
Gotcha.
So it makes you not link those two. It forces you to think back, well, where is the...
So actually,
And again,
if you're on
at Mishkan Hashem, Timeh. He didn't make God impure. He made Mishkan Hashem with a Zakef Katon with a pause. Timeh. So if he doesn't do this and he goes to the temple, it's not that he's making God impure. He's introducing impurity into the tabernacle with, again, the pause defined by the notes. So now we're going to get to one without a pause. V'ikhu elecha fara aduma tmima. You should tell the people that they should take in front of you fara, not para, but it loses its dot, and we're going to come to why after a kaf sofit it's losing its dot. Not para aduma.
What was the word before?
Elecha.
And the
Aleph, Lamed, Yud, Kaf Sofit.
and
It
that's
has
one
a
of the letters?
Klishak Tana. Klishak Tana does not have a stop. It's a mission. Klishak.
What else?
Okay.
You said the Beged Kefet. Para.
Beged Kefet. So,
What was the
para,
word before
the
para?
pay, okay, I'm going to get to that.
You said, right?
I'm going to get to that. I want to go through the notes first so that we're sure that these are connecting notes. So, it's a Tlishak Tana, which is a Masharet, not a Melech. So that means that the next word is connected to it. So this word, Elecha, is going to influence Para and turn it into Farah. Now, we know that from our rule before, it has to be an Aleph, a Hey, a Vav, or a Yud. So, Kaf Sofit isn't any one of those.
Right.
However, when we see the word Elecha with a Chaf Sofit at the end, it's treated as a Kaf Hey. The Hey is implied. And that implied Hey is going to take the dot away from Para and turn it into Farah because it's a Tlishak Tana that doesn't have a pause. That's a Masharet, not a Melech.
So,
Are we all there?
If it wasn't
So
those notes,
it's a note that continues on, so therefore it's influencing, and it's not an Aleph, Hey, Vav, or Yud, but one of the implied rules is a Chaf Sofit has the function of a Kaf Hey. So the Hey is implied, it's taking away the dot from the Para. Now, this is a Para Aduma, it's a red cow. And then we say Tmima, it's entirely red. What's this red cow allowed to have?
2 hairs.
It's allowed to have two non-red hairs. So it's not complete. It can have up to 2 hairs. It's not Tmima, so it's been weakened. It's Farah. It can have the tiniest of blemishes. So our notes are telling us that, our pauses and our notes are telling us that Para is turning into Farah, that it can have the most minor of blemishes about it and still be acceptable for its purpose.
The other places that it mentions Paraduma, if it didn't have...
The dot
So,
is there, though,
this is-
physically written.
The dot
is
no,
there?
they're not there.
So the dot in when you look at it at a Sefer Torah, the
Right.
dot is not written. None of the dots are written. However, all of these are Torah the motion, the Sinai. These are all passed down. Not only the dots in the letters, the vowels underneath the letters, and the notes, all passed down. All codified and checked by multiple sources who have corrected any errors throughout time, gone through all of the various variations and said which ones are the correct ones, according to the majority of books and according to any interpretations that might have been given. So this has been something that has been guarded.
Mhm.
Okay, so we got that. It's Farah Aduma. Why? Because it's Tlisha Ktana, which is a connecting node, a Masharet. Therefore, it connects to Para, turns it into Farah because it's implied Kaf Hey, and that's
Wow.
okay.
All for
I was giving the example of ones where there was a connection and ones where there wasn't a connection, just so that we get the idea of what this pausing really does in, I would say, the most extreme of examples.
Yeah, all that happens to one word.
Mhm.
Right. So in a lecha, that final kapsafit with the kamat, that's always implied kaf
Kaf
hey.
hey.
But let's say it was a layich. Is that also, would it be the same, or is it specifically the kapsafit with the kamat?
Because it sounds like
Because it's ha, and you can imagine it.
I'm thinking where you have Eliach with a connecting word after it, because Eliach usually ends a phrase. I'll have to look that up. I'll find a concordance and look that up on Shabbos, Bli Neder, and we'll see what we can do with that. So I don't know if people know what a concordance is. There are people who have taken
There's a Shakespeare one.
every single word that appears in Torah, and what they write after that word is every occurrence of that word in Torah. So you'll have the word ki, and you will have hundreds and hundreds of
Right.
examples of where you see the word ki. And then you'll get to
Even
more
every
every et, and every eight, and ve'et, and so on, and it categorizes each one and gives you the source
Who
of.
wrote the concordance? Is it
where-
one person wrote the concordance?
I'm not sure.
Evan Shoshana, he didn't
mhm.
write it, or that's the
Mhm.
publisher or whatever.
I-
Or Jas,
Yeah.
Oh, maybe Jas.
I may have the concordance downstairs, but it might take a minute to find it.
Yeah, but it's not so important. But we're just realizing that somebody has gone to the effort of doing that, and
And there's a concordance for
Yeah.
Shakespeare too.
mhm.
Those are the only two books that have concordance. Shakespeare
That's
also has concordance.
where I've seen it before. I
Word
don't
for
know the
word.
word, but that's where, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Wow.
We're going to move back into our parsha. Does anybody remember exactly where we were?
I think we were at 50.
Pigeon, I think so too.
Shakespeare.
Right, we were talking about the
We
end
are
of
on
52,
page
I think.
50 in the section on Noach,
This is
Bereshit,
perfect for Shiloh Khan. We were talking about Shiloh Khan. It's about birds.
Pasuk Zion, the
Sending
seventh
the birds out.
pasuk, 8-7.
Dove and the crow.
Vayishalach, and he dispatched with a tipcha. So this is a note that's going to roll in some of the concepts that have come before and then pause slightly afterwards. Since there was no side window in the ark to observe the surrounding conditions directly, Noach had to rely on a report from a suitable species, and he dispatched a winged messenger for that purpose, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark.
I thought there was a side window in the ark.
There was a window on the top, not on the side.
Wait,
So,
is it, what do you mean? It's not a skylight. Is it? No. So we were saying it's just on the
With
top
these,
floor.
from above. It
How do
was
you know
just
that? It says no, but it says but sad tasim or something.
Petach HaTeva B'tzidat HaSim, the door to the ark.
And the Sohar doesn't say that.
It doesn't.
Sohar was on
No.
the top.
So
There was a skylight.
with right, we were Rashi questions whether it's just something that is
Like
opaque
what, yeah?
and
Chalon, we did the
Mhm.
Chalon thing.
yeah.
So is he saying, and he dispatched a winged messenger because the shape is the shape of a wing? Like the tipcha, how does the tipcha tell us about a winged messenger, except that directional shape of the wing of the reading mark, if it looks like a wing? Like, how do we know?
Well, normally the messenger couldn't go out and do much. In other words, if they couldn't fly, that animal would be a source. That's sufficient.
So we know from the previous sentence that Noach is taking sort of the top off of the ark, so it's an animal that had to get out through the top end. But other than that, I'm not sure why the backwards reference would tell us that this is a bird rather than any other animal, other than specifically he mentions the next word a bird, but it's got to be backwards looking, so it's because he's taking off the top from the ark. That it has to be an animal that can go up.
So this bird's coming out of the Torah or Chalon, not the
Mhm.
Tefach, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that can fly.
So,
And it would make sense, that if they're still partly submerged, you
Mhm.
can't really necessarily open the door because it might
Right.
let water in.
Et
I bet he can go out
ha'oreh,
himself if he doesn't need it, right?
with the crow. Interesting with. After making his choice for the task, Noach encountered a quarrel with the crow, as indicated by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. This is with an etnachta, so this is the note that tells us that we've reached a stable spot. So he's going to quote Midrash here. MB, a rabbi said that the crow became angry because it was elected to face disasters, while Noach saved the clean birds, even though they were larger in number. In addition to the relative malnutrition in the ark, the crow saw discrimination because, as a single phenotype of creation, it said it should be spared from the disaster. There are other views explaining the choice of the crow for investigations. E.g., the crow is similar to the type of a magpie, which, like the oracles of Delphi, was used in antiquity for prediction and fortune telling. It was determined by the way the bird turned its head, the direction it took. Even now, in various places, people believe that when a magpie croaks against a house, it announces a valuable letter or money. So
It sounds like Black Lives Matter. Because there's already discrimination against, even the crow is saying, you discriminate because I'm black. A crow is black, right? A black crow.
So what's interesting here is that he doesn't quote the Midrash, which says that the crow perhaps had designs on Noah's wife,
Right.
and Noah sends the crow out in order to diffuse that situation, and that certainly would also be a stabilizing influence as well, sending the crow away for a little while.
What do you call it? Who delivers the letters? Aren't they crows? Who deliver the letters?
I don't know.
Owls.
You think it came up,
Oh, they are.
you think about Games of Thrones.
No, to the house, not boys in
Game of-
school, but when it comes furious, fast and furious, was that also all?
Game of Thrones is ravens.
Okay. Bless you.
Love
You
you.
look at one more.
So, is it ha'oreh? So it has sort of two stops in it, right? It has a psik and it has an etnachta. So
Yeah.
is there, how does that work and what's the significance of that? Does that mean stop a lot?
No. So there are two reasons that you'll find that coming into a word. Sometimes you will find that coming into a word because the note, by its essence, comes either at the beginning or at the end of a word, and we'll go into that another time. I'll give you a sheet on which notes come at the beginning, which ones go at the end, and why they come at the beginning and go at the end, and so on. So when you have a note that by its nature comes in a specific part of the word, you will put an emphasis on the syllable that is actually emphasized. And sometimes, even though the note says that there is a major emphasis on a particular syllable, you can have words that will have more than one emphasized syllable, so that the other syllable doesn't get swallowed or eaten up. This is one of those examples where you need to not lose if you have a very deep throaty letter like an ayin, and you don't give it any emphasis, then it can be lost or unpronounceable. So that's why it gets an emphasis on that syllable as well, because otherwise the word would be almost unpronounceable. If you're
Well, you're
pronouncing the ayin correctly, then you can't not emphasize it.
So it's emphasizing
So-
ha, o, re, so that you separate the three syllables, is that?
Mhm. So that the ayin doesn't get swallowed up by how, right? If you how rave,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
because if you didn't separate out the ha, then you couldn't do that.
Right.
It would flow.
You need
The
to have
ha would flow into
emphasis
the
on
o.
it.
Okay, you know, say, Atayodea, Tayodea, you know, they
Mhm.
know everything, so.
I'm wondering, sorry if I may ask the question. This one says Vayeshalach, as opposed to something by Yishlach, like Yishlach Nachum. And I'm having a recollection, I'm not sure if it's valid or not, but Vayeshalach is a more determined kind of
Yes.
ascending.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would speak well into the crow didn't want to go, and he's saying, like, go. Right?
Sure,
Forcing
or
him
not the door.
And again, that's why ha'arev, when he sends it out, there's a stability there because it was an influence that needed to be removed,
Right.
either for its own sake or for his sake.
Right. Interesting. But then the quarreling would diminish once he's already
Mhm.
answered, sure.
Yeah.
Was the concept of the crow being the quarrelsome creature because of his name, Orev, like Erev Rav?
Arabs.
Or Me'urav, you know, all mixed up.
Mixed up, yeah. But Orev is also pleasant. The Ha'arev now, it's a hard word because.
Well, don't forget, Hebrew words are davar v'hipucho. Hebrew
Right,
words
oh,
can
right.
mean the thing and its exact opposite.
Yeah.
So,
And
the
then
names,
mixing becomes
right?
pleasant.
Names of animals in Hebrew, and in fact, names of people in the Bible, tell about a salient feature of them, or an emphasized feature, and isn't necessarily the given name that they would have. It would be one of their names, and it would imply the most important characteristic, or the characteristic that most fulfills its nature, or most fulfills its purpose in creation, or most describes what it's become.
But with this
so-
Orev has many meanings, so it's hard to know which one it is. Like, is it the pleasantness?
Agreed.
Is it the,
But it,
yeah.
right,
Agreed.
but if
So-
it says
so-
Vayishalach et ha'orev,
Oh.
he's sending out the quarreler, like the
Mixed up
mixed-
on it, yeah. The one
yeah.
who
The
got
instigator.
the ship is
And again,
Right.
and again, that's perhaps where you get the midrash of the Orev chasing after Noah's wife, because it's something that wanted to mix species yet again, and he sent that out.
Right. And that's
Right,
why you
so-
get the stability of
Mhm.
the Nafka.
I think we'll go on. Vayitse, and it went.
That's interesting because there's two Parshat, there's two Parshas that are going to be later in Bereshit,
Just
Vayishlach and Vayetze.
if you're looking at the vowels underneath, it's Vayetze, Patzach under the Vav, a Tsere under the Yud, and another Tsere under the Tzadik. It's in the printing here. It's a little difficult to read. And it went. Number 3, the crow was obliged to fulfill the order of the commander of the ark, and it went unwillingly on its mission, as denoted by the shape of the reading mark. This is a mapach. This is something that's going to take what has come before and focus it forward. So we have before the fact that the Orev had to be sent forcibly, so that it's folding that into the fact that it did go, but it went with the hesitance that was said before. Nonetheless, it's going to continue on its mission. So that's the focusing quality of the Mahapach. Yatso is a pashta. Pashta slightly emphasizes the word, and leads into what's going to come after it. Leaving.
The double lashon Yatso also sort of hints that it was quarrelsome and that like he didn't want to go willingly. Sort of, but Yatso, like get out of here. Double. Why the double?
Not particularly relevant to this perush.
Okay.
If they don't have a single note on them, then I wouldn't necessarily connect them to this perush, because he doesn't do that, right? He doesn't take the previous the two-word combinations unless they're connected by the notes.
So you mean if Yatso
By
didn't have a note or
Yatso,
something?
so if there would have been one note on those two words. So Yatso Yatsa. When we have the story with Esav and Yaakov, Esav comes in as just after Yaakov had left, and it says Yatso Yatsa, and I'll find that in the Chumash later. But I think that's one note on Yatso Yatsa. So I would take those two together. This one, Vayetze, is leading into Yatso, but Yatso is probably separated from it slightly because it's emphasized by itself. However, when it was